the Authors Connection Show. I'm your host, Susan Klaus, and an author of thriller and fantasy. I'm plugging myself, and I'm coming to you today from beautiful Orlando at the Florida Writers Convention, and with me, across from me, is Teresa Bruce. She is a short story writer, and she held up my interview because she had to have her photo taken, so she's a pretty popular girl here. Welcome to the show, Teresa.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
The last author I was just talking to, which will be in the first half of the show, we were talking about the difference between short story writing and writing a novel. And I fessed up that I'm no good at short stories. I just cannot. To me, it's more work, fitting it all in. But, well, let's start with the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
I grew up in Orlando, so I'm from around here.
Oh, Florida cracker. I love it.
I am. I've lived a little bit out of other places, but always returned, and this is home.
And when did you start writing? I mean...
Well, the first story I wrote may not count. It was called Larry the Lizard, and I wrote it in elementary school, but I've been writing a lot.
But you had the bug.
I had the bug. I had an English teacher in high school that I absolutely despised because she made me write and revise and rewrite and revise. But I realized afterward she did me the greatest service by making me look at how I put my words together.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize then that I would have writing become so much a part of the rest of my life.
So, aside from writing short stories, what else do you do in Orlando here?
I'm an editor, and that's my day job. But I also write a blog called What to Say When Someone Dies at tlashes.com. And I write primarily for helping people who know someone that's grieving to help them understand what they can do to help, because so many people, when they find out a friend has lost someone, don't know what to do.
Yeah. Now, how did that come about? I mean, it's a very good topic that people would be interested, especially you're going to somebody's funeral, and like, God, what do you say? And of course it depends on who has died. If it's a young person in the beginning of life or elderly, I would think it would be vary on what you should say. I'm guessing here,
No, you're spot on. The circumstances are different for everyone. I started writing and researching heavily about this after my husband died 4 years ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know if that's the right thing to say.
That is absolutely the right thing to say. The first thing is to acknowledge that you know that the loss happened. Sometimes people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they say nothing. Yeah. And that's worse because it makes the bereaved person feel as if they're being ignored.
Yeah.
So saying I'm sorry and saying I don't know what to say are actually two really helpful things.
Oh, so they don't have to buy your your book or whatever. So that's where that stemmed from. Was
a lot of people really wanted to help, and I know people meant well, but some of them just didn't think. I have a kind of a unique experience with the way my husband died. It was completely sudden. We had no idea that it was going to happen. So I went through all of the sudden shock and grief of someone who has no forewarning. On the other hand, he had been sick. We didn't know what was wrong with him. And so I went through some chronic care issues of him deteriorating. Again, it was not a situation that the doctors or anyone thought he would die of. And we actually still don't know that the two were related. So I also went through the long-term chronic loss of watching someone erode piece by piece. Same with my mother when she passed away with cancer. So I've seen both sides of the sudden death had no warning and the lingering leading up to watching it happen piece by piece. And there's no better way to lose someone, but the approaches people can take in helping to comfort and console the bereaved can be similar.
Okay. But now is this is a I'm sorry, and go back to, I know you're writing this. Now, how do people find this information that you have?
A lot of it's by word of mouth. I've also networked with several other grief writers. Megan Devine of Refuge in Grief is one who has an excellent site.
But you have not written a book
No, I haven't
a
written a book.
self-help book about it.
I may do that at some point.
Because I would think that would be a pretty popular I mean, it's a terrible subject. It's a bummer. But, I mean, I would still think people, that if they know, like I said, going to a funeral or whatever, that, and they're a little worried about
right
what to say. And like I said, the circumstances, I would think, like, if somebody who is taking a long time to die, it'd be different as far as, well, thank God our suffering's over type. I'm sure that's not a thing to say, but I mean, but along that line
right.
of, wow, they lived a really good long life and ba-ba-da-ba-da. Mm-hmm. So you should write that book.
I've decided from the feedback I've gotten from the blog that I really do need to put it into a book, because there are a lot of books about grief and about going through the process yourself. In fact, one of the other writers here at the conference, Dawn Bell, recently wrote Wife of the Deceased, and it's her story of her experience going through the bereavement process. Ironically, the timing is her husband died around the same time that my husband died, and we met just in the last year at one of the Florida Writers' Conferences and found out about the connections between the timing. And it was interesting for me. She allowed me to beta read her book. It was interesting to see how similar many of our emotions were at different points through the time period that followed. Our circumstances were very different, but the emotions of grief are universal. And so...
Well, did you ever go to a grief counseling and those therapy...
I did.
I don't know if they're helpful or not,
well,
but...
The reason I kind of laughed when you said that at first is probably 3 to 4 weeks after my husband died, a friend I'd known for a while and hadn't seen found out, and she said, oh, you should go to a grief counselor. I believe someone in her family had done that. And I was still so raw in my loss that I thought, why are you telling me this? I don't need to go to a counselor. This is just what I'm feeling. But I had her suggestion in the back of my mind for a long time, and as I networked with other people, especially I joined several widows networks, I kept hearing, go to a grief counselor, go to a grief counselor. Well, I'm stubborn, and I waited until more than a year after the loss. And it really helped. It doesn't change the loss, it doesn't take it away, but it helped me to reframe what I wanted from my life from here on out, how I wanted to approach my own living.
Right. Well, the thing is, that blog has... What's the title? What's the name of the blog?
The name is What to Say When Someone Dies, and the address is tealashes.com.
Okay. The thing is, I see a lot of books, because I'm always interviewing authors, and they are written from the person who has lost somebody. But I think you have a very unique angle by, what people say to that person who has lost someone. I don't know of any other books, or that's why I said you should write the book.
You'd be really surprised at some of the things people say.
Yeah. Well, I imagine it can actually be some humorous stuff.
Oh, there are.
Like, hey, now you can go get laid that he's gone. I mean, it's terrible things like that, probably.
My husband had been dead less than 48 hours before the first person said, don't worry, you're young, you can get married again. I was 44 when I was widowed. And that was the first time that I heard.
That's not a good thing to say.
No, just don't. I know of...
I'm sure they're trying to be lighthearted and make you feel optimistic, but
I know of widows...
It's something you don't want to hear, at least for a year, probably.
No, and I know of widows who've been hit on while ordering the memorial marker, while at the wake, one even after the plug had been pulled in the hospital room.
Oh my gosh.
It's just
You really
incredible.
Do need to put that in a book. Because
and, most things that people say fall under the category of I know they meant well in spite of what they said,
right?
But those don't.
No, that's just being a complete jerk, I would say. Now, you're a short story writer.
Yes.
And tell us about some of the short stories. You said some of them have been published, or?
Yes. I think the first one that I had published was a kind of a funny piece. But I like writing with a twist. My first, memory of reading a short story and saying, wow, was Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. way back when, and I really like having things with a twist. So sometimes as you're reading my stories, you think they're meaning one thing and going one way.
Now these
but
are
by the
fiction.
Yes.
They're fiction. In what genre would you call them?
Just short story. Most of them are fun. I've dabbled in a little bit of flash fiction. This year I participated in the New York City Midnight Flash Fiction Challenge, and in the first round I placed high enough to get points. I haven't got the score back from the second round.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
It's a 48-hour challenge where you're given an assigned theme, a setting, and an object you have to include, a genre and setting. And it's great fun to force an entire story into 1,000 words or less in 48 hours.
Yeah, that's what the guest before you, she was a writing coach, and we were talking about short stories, and I was saying how much I hate them because I'm a novel writer and I just keep going. But the fact is, I do know a lot of friends who write short stories. They cannot write a novel. They cannot just go, how do you keep going with the story? And then vice versa, like me. I can do it, but to me it's not very satisfying. Or plus condensing, it's more work for me to write a short story because you have to get everything in.
You do.
A short little space. So I commend you all. I'll never go down that road. But
I never would have thought that I would either. A few years ago, I decided just on a whim to enter the Writers Association collection, and they have a 1,200 word limit there. Now, I have to tell you, when I was in 7th grade, my math teacher made me go look up the word verbose because he said I was verbose, and he wouldn't tell me what it meant. So I went and looked it up, and
what does it mean?
It means uses too many words.
Oh God!
And my critique partners and other people would give me feedback on my writing. You've got too many words in here. You need to cut it down.
It's called tightening, I believe.
Yes,
That's the word the authors love to use. Tighten up those sentences.
And so now I've really taken that to heart, and it's been a fun challenge to work to force the elements of storytelling with building suspense and getting to know the characters and placing the setting, all in very few words.
Yeah. Did you have any? I know a lot of short story writers started out as journalists, and that's the same kind of situation where you have to get all that information in that article to make it work out. Do you have any journalistic background or just?
Well, not per se. My first job as a high school student was working for a magazine, a local magazine that's now defunct. It was Central Florida Scene Magazine. And I was a gopher at the time. But one day they handed me galley proofs to proofread because they were desperate, and I caught several errors that the quote grown-ups hadn't seen in the galley proofs.
So that's how you got on the road to editing.
That was my first experience and exposure to editing and proofreading, and I've dabbled with it on and off for decades. I was a stay-at-home mom while I was raising our kids. After my husband's death, then I started working back in the field more part-time at first, working back up to full-time. So
now let's talk about the editing, because a lot of people don't realize, listeners, that there's two kinds of editors. There's the line editor, who's catching all the grammar and the commas and the misspellings, and then there's a content editor.
Right.
And for me, the content editor is the one that really can make or break a book. As an author, I know, like, hey, this chapter is boring, take it out or cut it down, or you need more information,
Yes.
And so do you do both on your editing?
I do, and it depends on the project. I work with authors on some small projects where they mostly need just the copy editing and the line editing, but I've worked with authors on manuscripts and developmental editing, and I think one of the most fun things for me is to do a project with an author that really loves their story and that I am engaged by their story right away. And everyone has things they can do to improve their own writing, and I love being able to get inside the story and see what works and be able to say to the author, this is great, I would love for you to do more of this because this really helps me know this character. Or to say, you already told this before, you're just slowing it down to tell it again, so move on.
Right.
I love working on that kind of project.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Like I said, as an author, I've been through quite a few editors. And it's almost like a marriage. I mean, your editor needs to know your genre first of all, because books. The voice in different genres is different. Some fantasies are a lot of adjectives, description. Thrillers are real tight. And I hate to say it, I've fired a few editors because it is like getting married to. People don't realize that unless they are an author and have gone through that process, that you really have to work very closely with your editor, and you have to have the same mindset. Not that you don't disagree, but so you do find that. I mean, have you ever had somebody that just would not listen to any suggestion? I mean, I'm sure you've had a few.
And I've told them, I said, you're the author, but if you don't want to take my suggestions, I don't mean to say my way or the highway, but if you don't want to take my suggestions, please don't use my name as your editor, because you really need to do this and this and this to make your manuscript work.
Yeah.
And you're the author, so you have the say. And I've had some that say, no, I want it this way, and that's their prerogative.
Yeah. And what's the word? Don't be married to your words, or something along that line. When you have to kill your darlings, or
yes, you have to be willing to sacrifice them. And I'm terrible for doing that for myself. I remember at one writers' meeting years ago, one woman in the group said, well, I don't need to pay an editor. I edit my own work. And 3 voices from around the room, in unison, as if they'd practiced, said, you can't edit your own work.
That's true.
Because you have the story inside your head. Yeah. And you may not catch the nuances of what you've put onto the page or haven't put onto the page. So you need to have a dispassionate observer tell you what is and isn't there.
That's very true. And boy, I preach that to the choir myself, because, I mean, I can read a page over and over and it looks perfect. Somebody else reads it and says, well, you got this misspelled, or you're missing a "the" in front of that word, You just don't see the mistakes. After you've read it, your mind is so set on seeing it.
Yes.
That you cannot see the mistakes. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
So that lady was she was wrong, She hadn't been at it very long, because that is one lesson I have really learned.
I also really recommend reading your work out loud to yourself before you send it to an editor.
It helps.
Because there's something, and if you always work on the computer screen, make a printout. There's something about having a different physical form of it that will allow you to catch things that you didn't catch otherwise.
That is extremely. I mean, I'll look at the screen and read the page, and then when I print it out, and I go, how did I miss that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just weird why that is. I don't know, but you just see things better when it's on the paper.
Well, you've seen...
It's even worse when you see it in the book after it's been published.
Yeah, that's much worse. But it's like the optical illusions, where you see a line of things and you think it's a straight, unbroken line, but then if you look closely, you can see there's actually a gap. But your eye has filled in what's missing because it sees what should be there. And it's the same thing with the gaps in your writing. Your mind might fill that in.
It's not being ignorant. It's just
no.
The way the human mind works that you can't see. Now, do you work privately, independently, or do you work for somebody?
I work privately. I have some clients that are recurring clients. I do some work for Debbie Getz of the College Park Community Paper, has me do some editing for her, but I don't let her call me the editor because she doesn't send all the work to me, but I do edit for some of her writers. And,
okay.
And that's a lot of fun because I get different kinds of material from different writing styles and short snippets all piled up near the one part of the month every month. So.
I imagine it would be fun. I mean, I'm an editor of sorts, when you're in a critique group, which
right.
when I have my 4 friends that are authors, and we sit down and tear each other's books apart.
With love.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes not. But, I think a lot of you're always asked to read somebody's books,
yes.
After you've been published, and
yes.
Then there always is the question, how truthful do I need to be? Have you ever had a project where it's so badly written that it really needed, that you turned it down?
Yes. What I've done, I usually, for potential, future clients, people I'm not familiar with their work, I usually will do a free sample edit of up to a certain number of words, just so that I can get a feel for what their work is like. They can get a feel for what my editing is like, to see if we're a good fit for that marriage.
Right.
And often I have, in the first 4 pages of a manuscript, I can tell that they have not vetted it with critique partners. They have not read it back to themselves. They have not looked at it. They've just sat down at the computer, written their story, and they've hit the end, and they're happy and ready to move on to the next step, which is great.
So they actually need a ghostwriter more than an editor.
Well,
if they don't want to do the work.
What they need is the experience of knowing what to do. So I will give them suggestions, just based on that sample, and say, as you go back through to revise your book before you're ready to edit it, these are things to look for.
Yeah.
And that can help them become better writers, and it would definitely save them on the cost of editing later. But especially for new writers, you want to be careful, because you don't want to discourage them in developing their voice.
That's true. Yeah.
They have their own style.
You have to be careful.
Yes, as much as you can.
To crush their, now, like I said, my critique groups, we're terrible to each other, but we should know better by now.
Right.
Well, listen, we're getting close. I do want to talk about this book. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes here.
Thank you.
And that's why Teresa's here, is to talk about the Florida Writer's Book, which is The First Step. And tell us about your story, and tell us about this book. They can get it online?
Yes.
Is it an ebook?
This year, I believe, is the first year they're doing an ebook format as well as the print format.
But will it be available on Amazon?
I believe so. I know that they have a link on the floridawriters.net website. I think that's the right site address. And the collection is The First Step. It's short stories and poems about the first step in any endeavor. When I wrote mine, I wanted
and the title of yours is?
Stained Glass.
Stained Glass. Okay.
I started several different stories and hit not exactly writer's block, but writer's tunnel. I kept going in a different direction. I submitted a poem this year instead of a story, which is something I had never done. So for the fact that it was different, I was surprised and thrilled that they put it in.
Well, it must have been good if it made the book.
Thank you. I'm very proud of it. Technically, I'm pleased with the way it went. I believe I went through 17 full revisions before it became what it is. And it's extremely personal, though. It's my first step as a widow, the moment when I realized I needed to call my daughters who were at college and tell them that their father had died. And everything I tried to write, as I thought about the theme of The First Step, kept recircling back to that moment, that first plunging step.
Yeah.
And so that's what I wrote.
Well, that sounds like a very deep poem.
It is, and I really can't believe I submitted it to publish it publicly, because I've shared a lot about myself and my experience on my blog. I have other friends who've had other losses, the losses of children, the losses of siblings, parents. Every loss is unique, but and every loss is personal.
Right. Even a loss of a pet can be pretty traumatic for some people. It is. Because they are like kids, a lot of them, and
they are.
And
they're
when you rely on them for friendship and companionship, and I can think of a few pets that were a lot better than my ex-husband's. But, okay, tell us your blog. Tell us the title of this book clearly. And
the title of the book is Florida Writers Association, The First Step. It's the FWA collection number 6. And it's available on floridawriters.net.
Okay, and the name of your blog?
It's What to Say When Someone Dies. And the address is tealashes.com. Teal and ashes, the bright, vibrant color, and the gray of ashes. After my husband died, I saw everything in black and white for more than a year. It wasn't conscious. It was just the way I perceived things.
Yeah.
When I went clothes shopping because something wore out, I grabbed black or white. Not consciously. I wasn't thinking, I'm going to wear black for mourning. I just couldn't see colors. A group of men from our church offered to come and paint my house, help out the new widow, which was a sweet, beautiful, wonderful gesture. They said, "What color do you want it?" I said, "White." They said, well, what color trim? I said, I don't need trim. They said, our wives will kill us if we don't put trim. So I said black. I couldn't see or think in any other colors for a long time. And the first time I started realizing I was recovering, bringing color back into my life, I had, again, bought some IKEA pillows that were black and white to spruce things up, again, black and white. And I decided one day, I'm going to dye them teal. I got some dyes, mixed them up, dyed the pillow covers.
And you're wearing teal today, I believe.
I wear
She's
teal.
got a beautiful teal sweater on.
Thank you. I wear teal every day just because my blog is Teal Ashes. So, and it's also as a reminder that, yes, life stopped. People say life goes on. It didn't. It stopped.
No.
Life resumed, but it was different. And I had to relearn how to go through that new, different life. And so, wearing the color is a reminder. Life is beautiful.
Well, it's
different but beautiful.
We have to wrap this up, but it's been great having you and insight, and I'm sure the listeners got a lot out of the editing, and they should check your blog out, because it sounds like I still think you need to write the book, though. Quit giving away that info for free and make some bucks out of it.
Well, there will be more in the book than there is on the blog, but I do that as a public service because people need
to know.
Need it, yeah.
Well, some people just don't know,
right?
And they want to be helpful, and we could go on and on with this interview, but my time is up.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Teresa.